Quinn's voice. We didn't ask for this, but we'll be damned if we're leaving. A new dawn for humanity. Humanity had once been an emerging force in the universe, a species full of ambition and potential. They had traveled far beyond their home planet Earth and begun to spread across the stars. But as the years passed, it became clear that humanity's presence in the galaxy was no longer a symbol of progress. It had become a nuisance, an obstacle to the greater cosmic harmony that the advanced civilizations of the universe had worked so hard to establish. In the end, it wasn't war that cast humanity out of the galaxy. It was a decision of necessity driven by the cold calculus of survival. The humans were seen as a burden, a weight dragging down the smooth advancement of the other species. The issue wasn't their potential, it was their failure to adapt quickly enough to the demands of an ever-expanding universe. They were the awkward child in a room full of cosmic giants. Their advancements, though impressive for their time, could not compare to the long-standing technological marvels possessed by the galactic empires that controlled the vast reaches of space. Humanity had been a rapidly advancing species, but their progress was too erratic. They were a young race bursting with energy but lacking the refinement and stability of older, more seasoned civilizations. By the time they had expanded to other star systems, the galaxy was already home to powerful ancient species, with millennia of technological advancements and social cohesion. And when the humans began to encroach on territories that other species had long considered their domain, tensions rose. Their technology is primitive, Ambassador Zurnar said with a sigh, his deep, gravelly voice reverberating through the briefing room. The ambassador was a tall, gaunt figure with pale skin that shimmered slightly in the low light. His dark eyes gleamed with the wisdom of his species, the Zorath, who had mastered the manipulation of the fabric of space itself. Their weapons are inadequate. Their bodies, though resilient, are fragile compared to ours. They are like children playing in a field of giants. Quinn Rain, standing at the far end of the room, frowned. The words stung, but they were the truth. Humanity has become a problem. Yet Quinn couldn't help but feel the weight of injustice in those words. His hands were clenched fists, holding back the fury he felt at hearing his people spoken of so callously. I understand, Quinn replied, his voice firm, but tinged with the weariness of someone who had heard the same arguments for years. But the people on Earth don't know their place in the universe. They're still learning, we're still growing, and we can't let them be discarded because of that. Zurnar tilted his head slightly, acknowledging Quinn's persistence. You misunderstand me, Quinn. This isn't about their learning curve. It's about their survival. Do you not see it? They are the weakest link. Their entire existence is a gamble that could jeopardize everything we've built. Humanity had made great strides in certain fields, but in comparison to the ancient civilizations that now held dominion over the galaxy, they were still far behind. Their bodies, despite their adaptability and resilience, were fragile compared to the other species. Most species could survive in environments that would break a human body. The Icthari, for example, had evolved to breathe in methane-rich atmospheres, while the Verlac were able to withstand extreme radiation levels. Humans, by contrast, required carefully controlled environments, something that had not gone unnoticed by the interstellar powers. Furthermore, in terms of military might, humanity was outclassed at every turn. Yes, they had developed sophisticated weaponry, plasma cannons, antimatter bombs, and formidable shields, but they were far from the level of sophistication seen by the true powers of the galaxy. The Crystalline Federation could manipulate energy on a galactic scale, wielding weaponry capable of tearing apart entire fleets with a flick of a finger. The Zorath had mastered the art of manipulating space-time, creating weaponized fields that could twist and tear through the very fabric of reality itself. And humanity, they had not even begun to explore those possibilities. Yet despite their weakness, humanity was not without its hidden strength. There was one thing, one technological leap that they had discovered, something no one else had even dreamed of. This hidden advantage, still secret from the galactic powers, was their last hope for survival. Quinn, what do you know about their technology? Zurnar asked, looking at him with an almost predatory glint in his eyes. Quinn paused, his mind racing. There was no denying it, he knew about the technology, the ancient power that humanity had unlocked when they first began to experiment with the fundamental forces of the universe. It was something they had stumbled upon accidentally, something that allowed them to manipulate space-time in ways that even the greatest minds of the galaxy had not anticipated. The technology wasn't a weapon, at least not in the conventional sense. It wasn't a fleet of ships or an army of invincible warriors. No, it was much more subtle, far more dangerous. "We have a way to hide," Quinn said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "We found a way to manipulate the very fabric of space, a method to warp the space around us, making us undetectable to any form of external scanning or observation." Zernar raised an eyebrow. "You mean to say that you've mastered cloaking technology, invisible ships perhaps?" "Not just ships," Quinn replied, his voice growing more confident. "We can hide entire cities, entire fleets, anything really. By distorting space itself, we can create pockets of reality that cannot be detected no matter how sophisticated the scanning method. It's not just a cloak, it's a breach in the very structure of spacetime." Zernar stared at him, his expression unreadable. "I see. And this is your secret weapon, a technology so hidden that even the oldest civilizations have failed to uncover it." Quinn nodded, but there was a sense of uncertainty in his mind. While the technology was revolutionary, there was no denying that it was still young, untested in the chaos of real intergalactic conflict. "Yes," he said, "we can remain unnoticed, hidden from those who would seek to destroy us, but only if we use it wisely." The weight of those words hung heavy in the air. For the first time in a long while, Quinn felt a glimmer of hope. Despite their weaknesses, despite everything stacked against them, humanity had something no one else knew about. Something that could change everything. Ambassador Zernar's gaze softened slightly. "Perhaps there is hope for your people after all, but do not mistake your hidden advantage for safety. The galaxy is vast, and there are forces at play that even you cannot comprehend." Quinn met Zernar's gaze. "I'm not asking for safety," he said with a quiet, determined strength. "I'm asking for the chance to survive, the chance to make our own place in the universe." Zernar studied him for a moment, then gave a slow nod. "Very well. But remember this, Quinn. It is not the strength of a weapon, but the will to use it wisely that will determine your fate." With that, the meeting ended. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. Would they remain a forgotten relic cast aside by the universe? Or would they rise hidden in the shadows and prove that even the weakest species could find its place in the stars? As Quinn left the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that the time to act was drawing near. Humanity had been cast aside, but the true struggle was just beginning. And in the depths of space, the secrets they held could be the key to their survival or their undoing. Quinn Rain was not the kind of person who caught attention in a crowd, at least not immediately. He was of average height with a lean, wiry frame that hinted at his strength, but did not make him imposing. His face, sharp and angular, had a quiet intensity, eyes always scanning, always searching for answers to questions others hadn't even thought to ask. His hair, dark and unkempt, rarely settled the way it should, much like his restless mind that never seemed to stop. A few days' worth of stubble covered his chin, evidence of his long hours spent in front of monitors, his thoughts always moving faster than he could keep up with. His hands were the only part of him that remained still when he worked. Never idle, they were always drawing plans, adjusting equipment, or manipulating tiny mechanisms. His appearance might be unremarkable, but his mind was anything but. Quinn had never been one to seek glory or recognition. He wasn't a traditional hero. He was driven by a burning need to understand the universe and its deepest workings. His passion for technology was not about creating gadgets or inventions, but about unlocking the deepest secrets of existence. After years of relentless study, Quinn had unearthed something that could change the fate of humanity. It wasn't just another tool or weapon. It was something far beyond that. He had discovered how to cloak humanity from the prying eyes of the galaxy's watchful civilizations, how to manipulate space itself in such a way that their presence could go undetected. "It's not just invisibility, Isol," Quinn had explained to his closest confidant, the alien diplomat Isol Korin, one night as the two of them sat in his cluttered workshop. "We can hide entire fleets, entire cities from detection. I've found a way to bend the fabric of space itself to create pockets that are undetectable by any scanning technology, by any sensors." His voice had a quiet urgency, the weight of his discovery settling heavily between them. Isol had stared at him, her dark, fathomless eyes narrowing slightly as though she were processing the enormity of his words. Are you telling me that humanity can just disappear from the galactic empires, from everyone? Quinn nodded, his expression intense. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. The technology is still in its infancy, but it's a game changer. For the first time, we have the chance to hide to escape the galaxy's watchful eye. The implications were staggering. For centuries, the galactic empires had ruled the stars with unparalleled power, their surveillance systems covering vast swathes of space. No civilization had been able to escape their gaze, and yet here was humanity, with the potential to slip away unnoticed. It wasn't just a matter of survival, it was about creating an entirely new future. But there was still so much to figure out. With this technology, Quinn's vision began to take shape. He knew they could not stay in their current location, surrounded by the ever-watchful eyes of the galactic powers. They needed a new home, a place where they could start fresh and build a future without fear of persecution. And so he began to plan. I've been looking at the star maps, Quinn said, spreading out holographic charts in front of the team. There's a region of space that's still unexplored. It's on the edge of the galaxy, far from any known trade routes or civilization. It's beyond the reach of most galactic patrols. Isol leaned forward, studying the maps with a keen eye. Where is this place? And why hasn't anyone noticed it? It's located beyond the nebula of Ashara. Quinn replied, his finger tracing a distant, almost forgotten star system. It's far enough away from the galactic core that the empires have no reason to venture there. It's desolate, uninhabitable, by most standards, filled with unstable gravitational fields, rogue asteroids, and natural hazards. To any other civilization, it's a dead zone. But to us, it's perfect. It's isolated enough to stay off the radar. Taryn Mace, a former military strategist and one of Quinn's closest allies, spoke up from across the room. Uninhabitable. That's hardly a reason to stay away. You think we can survive in that chaos? Quinn looked up, his eyes gleaming with determination. We don't need it to be hospitable. We need it to be hidden. If we can get there, we can make it work. We have the technology to survive and build. We'll create our own future away from the prying eyes of the galaxy. Taryn met his gaze, the weight of Quinn's words settling in. I'm with you, he said. If anyone can make it work, it's you. The plan was set into motion, and soon a small but determined group was assembled. It was a hand-picked team of scientists, engineers, and military personnel, each one essential to the mission. Quinn had hand-chosen every individual, knowing they would need not just skills, but the unwavering resolve to carry out such an audacious task. Isol, despite her skepticism, had agreed to join. As the diplomatic envoy of her people, she was far from being a warrior, but her intellect and diplomatic skills would be invaluable in making allies with any potential alien races they might encounter on their journey. She was also the only one who could truly understand the complex politics of the galaxy, a skill that Quinn was grateful to have at his side. You're certain about this, Quinn? Isol had asked him as they prepared to leave. We may never return to the galaxy. What if we're wrong? What if this is the beginning of the end for humanity? Quinn looked at her, a calm resolve in his eyes. We can't stay here, Isol. If we stay, we die. If we leave, we have a chance to build something new, something no one can take from us. Isol nodded, though her mind still churned with uncertainty. I'll help you build this future, she said softly. But I still wonder, are we running away from something, or are we truly creating something better? The ship was prepared, and with the coordinates set, the small fleet set off on their journey, leaving behind the familiar stars of their home galaxy and heading into the unknown. As they traveled further from known space, the vast emptiness of the universe seemed to swallow them whole. Quinn stood at the helm of the ship, his eyes fixed on the vastness before them, knowing that this journey would determine the future of humanity. It was a long and perilous journey. The deep space between galaxies was treacherous, filled with strange phenomena that tested the limits of their technology and their courage. But Quinn had a quiet confidence that only grew as they moved further into the unknown. They were hidden, unseen, and for the first time free. As the journey continued, the tension between Quinn and Isol became more palpable. Quinn's unwavering optimism sometimes clashed with Isol's more cautious nature. She had long been a mediator, someone who understood both the humans and the galaxy's more established civilizations. But her growing doubts about this hidden future gnawed at her. While Quinn saw this new beginning as humanity's path to greatness, Isol couldn't help but wonder if it was nothing more than a desperate escape. One night as they crossed into a part of the galaxy that had never been charted by any civilization, Isol approached Quinn on the observation deck of the ship. The stars were far away, the vast emptiness of space surrounding them. "Quinn," she began, her voice soft, "are you truly ready to never look back? This path, it's a one-way journey. Once we leave, there's no going back to the way things were." Quinn turned to her, his face illuminated by the cold, distant stars. "We don't need to go back, Isol. We're building something new, and it's going to be ours." She studied him for a long moment, and then with a deep breath, she nodded. "Then let's make sure we do it right." The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with risks and challenges. But for the first time in a long while, Quinn felt the weight of his people's potential. As they ventured further into the unknown, he knew they were not running away. They were walking toward their destiny. The journey into the unexplored void of space had not been without its challenges. It was in every sense of the word a leap into the unknown, a risk that Quinn Rain and his team were willing to take for the sake of humanity's future. However, as the ship traveled farther from the familiar stars, the dangers of deep space became more apparent. The journey took longer than anticipated, far longer than Quinn had ever imagined. What they had thought would be a mere few months of travel stretched into nearly a year. The unknown sector of space was much more hostile than expected. The first major obstacle came just a few weeks into their voyage, a rogue asteroid field that appeared out of nowhere, scattered across the ship's path like a minefield. The asteroids were large, some the size of cities, and they seemed to shift in ways that defied conventional physics. Navigating through them required all the skill of the crew, and it pushed their ship's technology to its limits. The ship's shields, designed to protect against minor collisions, were overwhelmed by the sheer size and unpredictability of the floating rocks. They had to make constant course corrections every few minutes to avoid catastrophic damage. Terran Mace, the ship's tactical officer, cursed under his breath as he watched the asteroid field grow larger on his screen. "We're not going to make it through this at this rate. The ship's systems weren't built for this kind of stress." Quinn, who had been monitoring the controls, didn't flinch. He was a man of few words, but in these moments he was unwavering. "We're not turning back. Keep the course steady." Terran gritted his teeth. "Steady? You're asking us to risk the entire mission for this? We're humans. We've always taken risks." Quinn said, his voice calm but determined. "And we will make it through this." With Terran's precise navigation and Quinn's unshakable confidence, the crew managed to guide the ship through the field, though not without a few close calls. They lost a few smaller ships in the process, but the main vessel remained intact. They had survived their first major test just barely. However, the dangers of deep space were far from over. As they neared their destination, they encountered another phenomenon, this one even more baffling. A rift in space, a dark, swirling vortex, appeared on their sensors. It seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, and no one on board had ever seen anything like it. "Is this a natural anomaly?" Dr. Leon, the biologist, asked as she studied the data. "It's not natural," Isol Koren said, her voice tinged with concern. "We've seen similar rifts before, but they were always isolated. This one is far larger, and it seems to be moving." Quinn looked at the swirling vortex, his mind racing. "It's a rift in space-time. It's pulling at the fabric of the universe itself." They had to make a decision quickly. The vortex was pulling them in its gravitational forces, strong enough to tear apart the ship if they ventured too close. But turning back wasn't an option. They had already come too far. "We have to cross it," Quinn said, his voice steady. "It's our only chance. I'll need all of you to trust me." Despite the uncertainty in the air, the crew followed Quinn's lead. They used their ship's newly developed space-time manipulation technology to create a small, temporary bubble of stability within the rift, allowing them to pass through without being torn apart by the forces. It was a risky maneuver, one that pushed the limits of their technology, but it worked. The ship passed through the rift and emerged on the other side, battered but intact. When they finally arrived at the unexplored region, Quinn couldn't help but feel a strange sense of awe. The space around them was eerily silent, untouched by the bustling civilizations they had left behind. The stars in this region were dimmer, their light barely piercing the vast stretches of empty space. It was as though they had entered a new dimension, one where the usual rules didn't apply. "We've made it," Quinn said, staring out at the vast emptiness. "This is it. This is our new home." The region was truly beyond anything Quinn had imagined. It was a place of vast emptiness, but also one of incredible beauty and mystery. There were no trade routes, no known colonies, just an endless stretch of dark space, dotted with stars so faint they were almost invisible. It was like stepping into a forgotten part of the universe, a place where the fabric of reality itself seemed to bend. But it wasn't just the silence that unsettled Quinn. It was the sensation that something was waiting here. The region was far from empty. There were ancient, enigmatic energies at work here, forces that Quinn couldn't yet comprehend. I don't like the feel of this. Isel muttered, her eyes scanning the data on the ship's terminals. There's something here. Something we can't explain. Quinn looked at her, his brow furrowed. What do you mean? I don't know, she said, her voice thoughtful. It's like there's something pulling at the edges of this space. It doesn't feel natural. As they moved deeper into the region, strange phenomena began to reveal themselves. They encountered faint energy signatures that appeared and disappeared in the blink of an eye, as though something was watching them. There were also strange fluctuations in gravity objects drifting in seemingly impossible directions, as if the laws of physics were being manipulated by an unseen force. But it wasn't just the anomalies that were strange. It was the sense that they were not alone. It was subtle at first, just a feeling in the air, but over time the crew began to sense it too. They weren't the first to enter this space, and they weren't the only ones there. The energy anomalies felt too deliberate, too intelligent, as though they were being observed. What if we're not the first ones to find this place? Terran asked, his voice tinged with unease. What if we've stumbled into something ancient? The crew wasn't sure what to make of it, but one thing was clear: they had only just begun to scratch the surface of the mysteries that lay in this forgotten region of space. Despite the growing sense of unease, Quinn pushed forward with their mission. It was time to start building. They had arrived, and it was no longer just about survival. It was about establishing a foothold in this uncharted space. The construction of their first base began immediately. They had designed the settlement to be fully self-sustaining, with technology that allowed them to harness the available resources of the region. Quinn's team used advanced nanofabricators to construct the core structures of the base. The buildings were not made of traditional materials, but of a new type of alloy they had synthesized, which was lightweight, durable, and capable of withstanding the harsh conditions of deep space. Dr. Leon's bioreactors were also used to cultivate self-sustaining ecosystems within the base, ensuring a reliable food source. The first facilities were small, more like research outposts than full-fledged cities, but they were built with the long-term goal of expansion in mind. As they began construction, there was a strange sense of excitement mixed with anxiety. The crew was acutely aware that they were doing something no one had ever done before, building a civilization from the ground up in a region of space that no one had ever explored. The sheer novelty of it was both exhilarating and terrifying. I never thought I'd be part of something like this, Terran said, looking out at the growing base as it took shape. We're really doing it, Quinn. Quinn nodded, his gaze focused on the horizon of their new home. This is just the beginning. We're going to build something no one ever thought possible. A civilization that's truly independent, free from the reach of the galaxy's empires. As the base slowly took shape, the feeling of being alone in this vast expanse of space began to fade, replaced by a new sense of purpose. Despite the mysteries and dangers surrounding them, the crew was united by the knowledge that they had the power to shape their own future. They had taken the first leap, and they were determined to make it a success, no matter what secrets the universe had in store for them. The first days of establishing humanity's new community in the unexplored region of space were filled with a sense of both excitement and trepidation. It was a time of discovery and hard work, as every member of Quinn Rain's team contributed to the massive undertaking of building from the ground up. This new home, far from the familiar stars of their old galaxy, required them to rely on their ingenuity and resilience. Humanity's technology, though advanced in certain areas, was still relatively primitive compared to the great galactic civilizations that had once looked down upon them. They didn't have the luxury of instantaneously mass-producing materials or utilizing state-of-the-art resources like those found in the galactic core. Instead, they used what they had: old tools, basic machinery, and a deep reliance on the creative problem-solving that had long defined humanity. Their first task was to secure a functional habitat. The initial colony was modest, a series of modular structures designed to withstand the harsh conditions of the region. They didn't have access to the advanced building materials used by galactic empires, so they had to make do with what they could manufacture locally or transport from their fleet. Nanofabricators, powerful but limited in capacity, were put to use to create basic infrastructure, housing power generators, food production units, and essential research labs. "We have to move fast," Quinn had said during the early planning stages. "We're building a future here, but it's not just about surviving. It's about laying the foundation for something that can stand the test of time." The first construction crew was a group of 50 people, engineers, builders, and scientists who would work tirelessly to get the colony up and running. The progress was slow, especially given the uncharted nature of the environment. The dangers of space were still present, and they had to carefully monitor everything from radiation levels to gravitational shifts. But the team was determined. They were working with a sense of urgency, but they also understood the weight of their mission. They were not simply building a community, they were building the future of the human race. "Work isn't going to do itself," Terran Mace, the fleet's military veteran and one of Quinn's most trusted officers, said, with a wry smile as he oversaw the construction of the first biodomes. "Get those walls up, and let's see if we can actually start living here." While the team worked hard, the progress felt painfully slow at times. The colony grew, but at a rate far slower than Quinn had hoped. There were constant setbacks, machinery failures, communication breakdowns, and the challenges of adapting Earth-based technology to the unique conditions of this distant star system. Resources were scarce, and the team had to constantly innovate to meet the growing demands of their new society. Isol Corin, while not a technical expert, had proven invaluable in her role as a bridge between Quinn and the alien intelligence that could potentially be discovered in the region. As the colony grew, she took on the role of managing external relations, ensuring that they did not inadvertently disturb or make enemies of any ancient forces that may have been hidden in the unexplored zone. "Quinn, we have to be careful," Isol cautioned as they watched the biodomes slowly take shape. "There are forces here that we don't fully understand. We don't know what this region was before we arrived. If there are ancient civilizations or worse, our technology might draw their attention. This place may not be as empty as it seems." Quinn paused, his gaze lingering on the growing structures in the distance. He knew she was right. The risks were great, but they had no choice. There was no turning back now. "We won't move forward blindly," Quinn reassured her. "We're careful. We'll adapt. But this is the only chance humanity has. We'll stay ahead of any threat." "You have my word." Despite the many challenges, the colony began to take shape. The first true structure they built was the central hub, which housed the administration, communications, and essential operations. Following that, the colony began expanding outward, with individual residential pods and food production facilities being constructed. The biodomes, while simple, were built using a mix of repurposed materials from their ships and the advanced technology of their portable nanofabricators. In parallel, Quinn and Isol worked tirelessly to develop an autonomous system that could manage everything from energy distribution to waste processing and even agriculture. With the limited resources available, they couldn't afford to have a workforce dedicated to every minor task. The answer was to create a system that could monitor and control everything with minimal human intervention. "We need a self-sustaining system," Quinn had said while discussing plans with Isol late one evening. "Something that can operate independently without us needing to micromanage every detail. If we want this colony to survive, we need to trust in automation." Quinn's vision was bold but necessary. He and his team developed a sophisticated system using AI-assisted algorithms to regulate everything from power generation to crop rotation. The energy system was based on solar and geothermal power, tapping into the natural resources of the planet to maintain the colony's operations. The AI, which was still in its early stages, was tasked with managing resource allocation, detecting malfunctions, and ensuring the safety of the inhabitants. Isol, while still cautious about the unknowns lurking in the depths of the new region, had worked alongside Quinn to ensure that the system was as secure as possible. If we're not careful, she had warned, the system could be hijacked. Any outside interference might exploit our vulnerabilities. But despite their precautions, something beyond their comprehension was still present. Strange energy pulses began to interfere with their systems. Small disruptions at first, but the frequency of these anomalies began to increase. Quinn and Isol didn't want to panic the colonists, so they continued with their work, but the unease never left them. One day an unexpected signal arrived. It was faint at first, a low-frequency transmission that seemed to come from deep within the star system. It was unlike any signal they had encountered before, and the AI was unable to decipher it. "Quinn, look at this," Isol said, her voice strained as she stared at the data on her terminal. "This isn't just interference. This is a message from somewhere." The signal seemed to be coming from a remote location within the system, near the fringes of the nebula that surrounded them. Quinn frowned, his mind racing. Could it be the remnants of an ancient civilization? Or was it something more recent, a presence watching their every move? "We need to investigate," Quinn said decisively. "Prepare the exploration team. We'll go out there ourselves." At the same time as their colony began to expand, the growing speed of humanity's development did not go unnoticed by the other galactic civilizations. The empires that had once dismissed humanity as weak and insignificant began to grow suspicious of their rapid advancement. The alien intelligence in the galaxy had underestimated humanity's resilience and resourcefulness. The first indication that their presence was being observed came in the form of an unannounced vessel, an exploratory ship from a distant empire that appeared on the edge of the system. They were clearly testing the waters, trying to determine just how far humanity had come since their expulsion from the galaxy. "They're watching us," Terran Mace said grimly as he monitored the incoming vessel's trajectory. "They're not here to help. They're here to see what we've done and whether we're a threat." Quinn had been expecting something like this. It was only a matter of time before the galaxy's more powerful civilizations became aware of the humans' presence. But he was undeterred. He had a plan in place for exactly this kind of situation. "We can't hide forever," Quinn said, his voice resolute. "But we'll show them that we can stand on our own. We won't let them dictate our future." As the exploratory ship neared, Quinn and Isol prepared for what could be their first major confrontation in their new home. Would they be accepted, or would the galaxy's old powers once again try to impose their control on humanity? Only time would tell, but Quinn knew one thing for sure: humanity had come too far to turn back now. As humanity began to settle into their new self-imposed isolation in the unexplored sector of space, their survival depended on their ability to innovate. The challenges they faced were unlike anything their ancestors had encountered. The environment was harsh, with fluctuating gravity, unpredictable radiation bursts, and a lack of resources that had once been taken for granted. But it was also a new frontier, a blank slate where their creativity and ingenuity could truly shine. One of the first major breakthroughs came from their efforts to adapt to the unique planetary conditions. On Earth, humanity has relied heavily on fossil fuels, renewable energy, and advanced solar technology. But here they needed something entirely new. The region they had settled in lacked a stable energy grid, and even their advanced solar panels were inefficient in the face of frequent radiation storms and cosmic anomalies. It was Isol Corrin, with her background in alien technologies and a natural talent for seeing connections between disparate systems, who made the first leap toward a new energy source. She had been working with Quinn on improving the efficiency of their biodomes when the idea struck her. "We need to think outside the box," Isol said, staring at the fluctuating energy readings on her screen. "The sun here is too inconsistent, and the storms make conventional solar panels useless. But there's another force at play here: gravitational waves." Quinn raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Gravitational waves? But those aren't a reliable source of energy." "I know," Isol replied, her voice steady with the confidence of someone who had seen the impossible before. "But what if we could harness them? Instead of relying on traditional solar or wind power, why not use the inherent gravitational forces of this region? We could build a system that taps into the gravitational fluctuations and converts them into usable energy." It was a radical idea, but one that Quinn immediately recognized as a potential game-changer. Together, they began experimenting with gravitational wave energy conversion, a technology far beyond anything they had ever attempted before. It involved creating an array of sensors capable of detecting the faintest fluctuations in gravitational waves. Once captured, these fluctuations could be channeled into energy storage units. Through a combination of nanotechnology, quantum field manipulation, and a series of artificial intelligence-driven algorithms, they developed what they called the gravitoric conduit. The gravitoric conduit was a massive undertaking requiring both immense energy and precision. It wasn't without its challenges that technology had to be calibrated constantly to account for the fluctuations in gravitational fields. There were early failures with energy surges that would overload their systems, causing blackouts in the colony. But each failure brought them closer to the solution. Once it was fully operational, the gravitoric conduit changed everything. It provided the colony with an almost unlimited energy source, allowing them to finally break free from the dependency on traditional fuel sources. The technology was highly efficient and could be applied to nearly every aspect of the colony's infrastructure. The biodomes were powered entirely by this gravitational energy, and the production facilities no longer had to rely on external resources. Even the transportation systems, which had once been dependent on fuel, now ran on energy harvested from the very fabric of space. It's not just about survival anymore, Quinn said, looking out over the thriving colony, his voice tinged with pride. This is a new dawn for humanity. We've harnessed the forces of the universe itself. The gravitoric conduit was heralded as the breakthrough of a new era. It didn't just give humanity the power they needed, it gave them a sense of autonomy and independence. For the first time, they weren't reliant on the technologies of the old world. They had created something new, something entirely their own, and it was a testament to humanity's potential when pushed to its limits. Despite this monumental achievement, the path to building a self-sustaining society was far from easy. There were still numerous obstacles to overcome. The colony, while growing, had to contend with unexpected setbacks. There were challenges in growing food in the new environment where the soil was unlike anything on Earth. It took years to develop an agricultural system that could produce enough to sustain the growing population. The bioreactors, which initially provided a small amount of food, had to be modified to work with the unique ecosystem of the planet. Dr. Leon, the biologist, led the efforts to genetically modify plants to survive in the harsh conditions. We need to find ways to make our crops more resilient, she said as she examined the data from her experiments. These plants are struggling, but if we can tweak their DNA structure, they might be able to withstand the fluctuations in temperature and the radiation from the stars. Quinn, ever the optimist, was quick to support her efforts. Do what you need to do, Leon. This colony will succeed not because it's easy, but because we're not afraid of challenges. It wasn't just about food and energy. It was about creating an entire infrastructure from scratch. Quinn and his team had designed a system where everything was automated. From resource management to waste processing, every aspect of the colony was overseen by artificial intelligence systems that made sure everything was running smoothly. These systems allowed the colony to remain self-sustaining with minimal intervention, and they helped to prevent the problems that had plagued Earth's overburdened systems. Despite the technological advances, the colony was not without its dangers. The constant radiation storms and cosmic anomalies continued to pose risks, and the region's unstable gravitational fields made it difficult to predict the movement of celestial bodies. However, humanity adapted. The AI systems were integrated into every aspect of the colony's infrastructure, from predicting storms to adjusting the course of the colony's ships. The central hub, once a tiny control room, had become a sprawling complex filled with data terminals, communication arrays, and energy converters. The people of the colony had also adapted, learning to live in harmony with the technology. They had built their lives around the new systems, creating a culture that valued efficiency, independence, and ingenuity. Education systems were established, with children learning how to operate the gravitoric conduit and how to grow crops in the biodomes. There was a shared sense of purpose. Everyone knew their role in the survival of the colony, and that collective effort brought them closer together. But it wasn't just about survival anymore. As the colony grew and prospered, the people began to realize that they were no longer just an isolated group struggling to survive in the void of space. They were becoming something more. They were becoming a new civilization. Look at what we've done, Taryn Mace said, standing at the top of one of the newly built towers overlooking the expanding colony. We've created something that no one thought possible. Humanity, our society, it's been reborn. Quinn nodded, standing beside him. We've only just begun. The galaxy doesn't know it yet, but we're a force to be reckoned with. The rapid progress of humanity's new society didn't go unnoticed. The sudden development of a thriving, self-sustaining community in the heart of a once uncharted region of space began to attract the attention of other civilizations. What had once been a small, isolated group of humans was now a potential threat, or at least an intriguing mystery to the galactic empires. The Zorath, one of the most powerful and ancient species in the galaxy, had long kept an eye on the humans from a distance. They had once believed that humanity would be nothing more than a passing curiosity, but the rapid expansion of the colony combined with the unexpected technology and advancements raised suspicions. "They've done the impossible," one of the Zorath counselors said, watching the data streams from their ships. "We need to know how. We need to investigate their progress." A fleet of Zorath ships moved quietly toward the human colony. They didn't yet know what they were up against, but one thing was certain: they were not prepared for the rise of humanity. As humanity's society continued to thrive, Quinn Rain stood at the heart of it all. He had built something remarkable, something that transcended the limits of what even he had imagined. The colony was more than just a refuge from the galaxy. It was a testament to humanity's enduring spirit. They had risen from nothing and created something new and powerful. The future was theirs to shape, and no one, not even the great galactic powers, could deny that. The success of humanity's new civilization did not go unnoticed. Despite the distance they had placed between themselves and the known worlds, the other galactic empires soon began to take a keen interest in the rapid development of humanity's society. What had once been a struggling species cast out of the galaxy by the more powerful civilizations was now thriving in a remote part of the universe. The emergence of a self-sustaining, independent human society was seen as both a threat and an enigma by the other galactic powers, and tensions were beginning to rise. For Quinn Rain, the leader of humanity's new world, the signs of increasing pressure were subtle at first, but they were there. The first sign came through a series of coded transmissions intercepted by the colony's communications arrays. These signals weren't particularly sophisticated, but their intent was clear: someone was monitoring them. For Quinn, this was no surprise. He had expected that the galactic empires would eventually take an interest in what humanity was doing. But as the transmissions became more frequent and the level of interest grew, Quinn realized that they were being watched more closely than ever before. Quinny Salcorn said one evening as they sat together in the colony's central command hub, reviewing the latest reports, "Something is changing. The Zorath have sent another probe near the outer edge of our system, and this time it's not just a passing scan, they're staying longer." Quinn leaned back in his chair, staring at the flickering holographic display before him. "I knew it wouldn't be long before they started sniffing around, but we can't afford to act in panic. The last thing we want is to escalate things prematurely." "But we can't ignore it either," Isel replied. "The Zorath are one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. If they see us as a threat, they could send more than just probes." Quinn looked at her, his mind racing. He had always known that humanity's existence in this isolated part of the galaxy wouldn't be a permanent sanctuary. He had hoped for more time, but it seemed that the galaxy's political currents were shifting faster than he had anticipated. The tension was becoming palpable. The colony's infrastructure was growing, its population was expanding, and its technological capabilities were far beyond what anyone had expected. And all of it was taking place in a region that had long been ignored by the established galactic powers. Humanity's rapid development raised questions. How had they done it? How had they built so quickly? And most troubling of all, what could they do with the technological advances they had developed? Over the course of several weeks, Quinn received more disturbing reports. There were more sightings of unidentified ships near the fringes of the colony's reach. Some were discreet, operating under the guise of scientific exploration, but others were much more direct, openly probing human territory. "They're not just watching us," Quinn Isel said one day, her voice filled with a rare sense of urgency. "They're gathering intelligence. They know we're hiding something, and they're trying to figure out what it is." In one instance, a mysterious fleet of ships belonging to an unnamed alien race entered the region under the guise of a routine survey mission. Their vessels were cloaked, seemingly appearing out of nowhere, and were equipped with advanced scanning technology capable of penetrating the human-made gravitational fields. The ships lingered on the edges of the colony, silently observing the human activities. It was a subtle tactic, but one that carried a clear message. The galactic powers were aware of humanity's presence and were not happy about it. Quinn and Isel understood the gravity of the situation. The last thing they needed was for their presence to be regarded as an unlawful encroachment into what the galactic powers viewed as their territory. They had fought for independence, but now they were in danger of being cast as rebels, threatening the status quo of the galactic balance. How would they respond? What are our options? Quinn Isol asked her, brow furrowed in thought. We've done nothing wrong, but our very existence is a challenge to them. They could demand that we leave this place, or worse, claim the region for themselves. Quinn turned to her, his gaze focused and determined. We have one advantage: the technology we've developed. We're not just hiding, we're thriving. If they try to force us out, they'll have to do more than just send a few ships. And I won't back down. We're not leaving. Quinn's words were resolute, but deep inside he knew the stakes were high. The peaceful society they had worked so hard to build was now under the watchful eyes of a galaxy that had once cast them aside. And what would happen if the empires decided that humanity's survival was a threat to their own power? As the tensions mounted, humanity's leadership began to make plans of their own. They had been preparing for the inevitable diplomatic maneuvering, technological safeguards, and military deterrence. Though Quinn had hoped for a peaceful resolution, he wasn't naive. The truth was, humanity's survival in this new corner of space would depend on their ability to navigate a delicate political game. We need to be proactive, Quinn told his council. We'll need to send a clear message to the empires that we are not going anywhere. But we'll also need to show them that we're not a threat unless provoked. Their first move was to prepare for potential diplomatic negotiations. Ambassador Zernar, the human diplomat who had worked tirelessly to forge a semblance of peace with the various galactic powers, would lead these talks. He would need to walk a fine line, making it clear that humanity was no longer the weak, unorganized species they had once been, but also emphasizing that they were not seeking conflict. Zernar's first statement to the Galactic Council was measured yet firm. Humanity has been a force of peace in this new sector. We've established our civilization here with the hope of building something greater, not to disrupt the balance of the galaxy, but to thrive independently, free from the overbearing control of empires that have overlooked us for so long. But even as he spoke, Quinn knew that not everyone would be so willing to accept humanity's existence in this space. The Zorath and other powerful empires would demand answers. They would want to know what humanity had discovered and how they had become so strong in such a short time. And so Quinn and Isol also prepared for more covert actions. They would continue to monitor the movements of alien ships, utilizing their advanced sensors and gravitational cloaks to remain one step ahead of any potential threat. Every possible advantage would be needed. The more they probe, the more we'll learn. Quinn said, his voice low. We can't be passive about this. We need to ensure that we're always one move ahead. Meanwhile, the people of the colony were beginning to feel the pressure. They had come so far, had built something incredible, but now they were faced with the reality of their situation. Would they have to face a second exile, this time at the hands of the very forces that had once rejected them? The colony's citizens were anxious but resolved. They knew that they had achieved something, that no one had expected: a new beginning for humanity. And while the future was uncertain, they were willing to fight for their place in the galaxy, just as they had fought to survive in the beginning. As the political and diplomatic tension reached its peak, Quinn Rain stood firm in his belief that humanity had a right to exist on their own terms. We didn't ask for this, he said to his closest advisors, but we'll be damned if we're going to let them take it from us now. For the first time in history, humanity was not just a member of the galaxy, they were a force to be reckoned with, and they would not back down. It had been inevitable. Despite the human colony's best efforts to remain hidden and peaceful, the growing presence of humanity in this remote corner of the galaxy had attracted the wrong kind of attention. As tensions rose between the human settlers and the alien powers observing them, the worst-case scenario came to fruition. The first conflict was not sparked by politics or diplomacy, but by the raw ambition of another alien species, one that sought to expand its empire at the expense of humanity's newfound freedom. The invasion came without warning, a sudden shock that jolted the colony out of its fragile peace. The Zorath, the ancient and highly advanced civilization that had been keeping a watchful eye on humanity's progress, decided to act. They had grown restless with the idea of a human society thriving in a region they considered their domain. In their minds, humanity's presence threatened the stability of the greater galactic order, and they could not allow such an independent and rapidly growing society to continue unchecked. They chose a strategic region just on the edge of the human colony's reach, a planet rich in resources located near the gravitational anomaly they had learned to harness. The Zorath saw this as the perfect location to expand their holdings. It was a resource-rich world, rich in valuable minerals and natural energy sources. The only problem was that it was already within the human colony's claimed space. "They're coming," Taran Mace said, his voice tight with urgency, as he stood in front of the holographic map, pointing to the sector that had been the target of Zorath interest. "We've intercepted their communications. The Zorath are sending a fleet to claim this planet." Quinn Rain's expression darkened as he listened to the report. He knew this day was coming, but it still hit like a blow to the gut. The Zorath had made their move. "We need to act quickly," Quinn said, his voice steady despite the rising tension. "We can't afford to let them take this planet. Not now, not after everything we've built." "What's our response?" Isol Korin asked, her voice calm, but with an edge of concern. "We don't have the military might of the Zorath. We can't match them in open combat." Quinn paused for a moment, considering the gravity of the situation. They were outgunned and outmatched, but they had no other choice. This wasn't just about defending a single planet. It was about sending a message that humanity would not be pushed around, that they had earned their place in the galaxy. "We'll fight. We may not have their firepower, but we have something they don't," Quinn said, his voice firm and resolute. "We have the will to fight for our freedom." The humans didn't have the sheer firepower that the Zorath possessed, but they had a unique advantage. The technology they had developed, particularly their ability to manipulate gravitational fields and remain hidden, gave them a tactical edge. With their advanced cloaking technology and space-time manipulation, they could stage guerrilla-style attacks and ambushes that would make it difficult for the Zorath to maintain their offensive. But first they needed to prepare. The human fleet, though small, was quickly fortified and ready for action. Quinn had the engineers modify the existing fleet of ships with enhanced stealth capabilities, using their gravitational wave technology to ensure that their vessels would be undetectable to Zorath scans. The first battle came just days after the Zorath fleet entered the sector. The Zorath, expecting an easy conquest, had underestimated humanity's readiness. They arrived in the area with a full battalion of warships, vast vessels, armed with advanced weaponry that could annihilate entire fleets in a single strike. Their ships, towering and crystalline in structure, glowed with energy weapons capable of destroying anything in their path. They had come to take what they wanted, and they believed humanity would crumble before them. But humanity was not ready to surrender. The first wave of Zorath warships began to deploy, sending drones and scout ships to secure the planet's surface. Quinn and his team had anticipated this move. As the Zorath ships entered the outer rim of the system, the human fleet, cloaked and hidden within the gravitational anomaly, launched its first strike. It was swift, calculated, and precise. Using their gravitational manipulation technology, the humans created localized space-time distortions, causing the Zorath ship's sensors to malfunction and their navigational systems to fail. This gave humanity's stealth ships the chance to strike launching missiles and disruptor beams that crippled several of the smaller Zorath vessels before they even had a chance to retaliate. "We can't let them regroup," Taran said through clenched teeth, his fingers flying over the controls of his ship. "We hit them hard now." The battle escalated quickly, with both sides exchanging fire. The Zorath retaliated with full force, sending a barrage of energy blasts and missile salvos toward the human fleet. The humans fought fiercely, relying on their advanced stealth technology and knowledge of the terrain to launch surprise counterattacks. Each strike was carefully planned, and the human fleet was agile, using their smaller size and superior maneuverability to avoid direct confrontation with the larger Zorath ships. Despite the advantage they had gained in the early stages of the battle, it was clear that the Zorath were relentless. They had the numbers, the firepower, and the superior technology. Yet even as the humans suffered losses, they refused to back down. Quinn Rain stood on the bridge of the central command ship, watching as the battle raged on. "We're not retreating," he said firmly. "This is our home. We fight for it no matter the cost." In the heat of the conflict, Quinn could see the spirit of the humans emerge. They weren't fighters by nature. Most of them were engineers, scientists, and pioneers. But when pushed to the edge, they fought with everything they had. There was something unbreakable about them, a resilience that no amount of advanced technology could crush. They were fighting not just for a piece of land or a planet, but for the future of their species. Isol, watching the battle unfold, turned to Quinn, her voice filled with a quiet pride. "They're not giving up. Look at them." "I never expected them to," Quinn replied, his voice full of conviction. "Humanity doesn't give up easily." The Zorath, despite their technological superiority, found themselves being pushed back. Humanity's unconventional tactics combined with their determination to protect their home had caught the Zorath off guard. It wasn't a victory by force, but a victory through willpower strategy and the innovative use of technology. After several hours of intense combat, the Zorath were forced to retreat. They hadn't expected such fierce resistance from a species they had considered weak, but humanity had proven them wrong. The Zorath, though immensely powerful, now knew that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. It was a lesson they would not forget. As the Zorath ships withdrew, leaving behind a trail of devastation, Quinn and Isol stood at the center of the command hub. The battle had been hard fought and the cost had been high, but humanity had won a crucial victory. "We did it," Isol said quietly, her voice filled with awe and relief. Quinn nodded, his gaze focused on the stars. "We fought for our future, and we'll keep fighting. This is just the beginning." Humanity's first conflict had proven something crucial. They were not just survivors. They were fighters, and anyone who dared to challenge them would learn that the human spirit was not easily broken. The battle against the Zorath had brought humanity to the edge of survival. The Zorath, with their overwhelming firepower, had pushed humanity to their limits. Despite their technological advancements, humanity had relied on their stealth guerrilla tactics and the sheer resilience of their will. But as the battle raged on, it became clear that there would be no way out without a significant technological edge, an edge that until that moment had remained hidden even from their closest allies. In the midst of the battle, when it seemed as though the human fleet was on the verge of collapse, Quinn Rain made a fateful decision. He ordered the deployment of a technology that had been kept under wraps since its inception, a secret weapon of sorts designed to be humanity's ultimate defense against any force that would threaten their existence. This technology was the Chronolock system, an invention born out of Quinn's own genius and collaboration with Isol Korn. It was a device that allowed the user to manipulate time within localized regions of space, creating temporary time dilation fields that could drastically alter the speed of events in a given area. In essence, the Chronolock could accelerate or decelerate time within a specific zone, giving the user the ability to outmaneuver even the most advanced military fleets. Quinn had been working on the Chronolock in secret for months, aware of its potential, but never fully trusting it to be ready until now. The concept was simple. By altering the flow of time in a small area, they could slow down enemy vessels, weapons, and missiles, effectively rendering them useless. On the flip side, they could accelerate their own movements, making their ships far more agile and capable of responding quicker than the Zorath could react. The technology itself was sophisticated, powered by quantum field manipulation and gravitational wave distortion. It required immense energy to activate, but when it worked, it created a localized bubble of slowed or accelerated time, which was almost imperceptible to the human eye. It was as if time itself was bending and folding around them, giving humanity the upper hand in what had seemed like an impossible battle. The first deployment of the Chronolock was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. As the Zorath advanced, the human fleet activated the device on a small scale, targeting the front lines of Zorath ships. The result was almost immediate. The Zorath's weapons fire slowed to a crawl, and their ships' movements became sluggish. What had once been an overwhelming onslaught of firepower became little more than a series of slow-motion, ineffective attacks. At the same time, the human fleet accelerated their own movements, darting around the Zorath ships with an agility that seemed almost supernatural. Their missiles, once slower than the Zorath's intercept systems could handle, now tore through the skies with lightning speed, hitting targets with pinpoint accuracy. "By the stars," Terran Mace said, watching in awe, as the Zorath fleet's once imposing array of weapons seemed to falter before them. "It's like we've broken the laws of physics." Quinn's voice crackled through the calm, steady and firm. "We've only bent them. Now we strike back." The Zorath, initially stunned by the change in pace, struggled to react. Their once dominant fleet had become ineffective, their weapons useless, as the Chronolock wreaked havoc on their targeting systems. It was a disorienting feeling for the Zorath. They were not used to being outsmarted. Their ships so powerful and invincible in their eyes were now reduced to sitting ducks, and the human fleet took full advantage. The chronolock was a game changer. It gave humanity the ability to fight back not with brute strength, but with a weapon that defied conventional logic. They were not just hiding in the shadows anymore. They were using their intelligence to turn the tide of the battle in ways that the Zorath could not anticipate. "What have we just done?" Isilkorn whispered to Quinn, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "We've leveled the playing field," Quinn replied, his gaze fixed on the battle unfolding before them. "Now let's finish it." The humans, now in control of the battle, began a series of surgical strikes targeting the weakest points in the Zorath fleet. Ships that had once seemed untouchable were now falling one by one, unable to respond fast enough to the agile human vessels. The Zorath were losing the battle they had assumed would be an easy conquest, and their arrogance was quickly turning into panic. As the tide of the battle turned, Quinn knew they had one last chance to send a clear message to the galactic powers. The chronolock had given them the edge, but now it was time to ensure that humanity's place in the galaxy was never again in question. Meanwhile, Ambassador Zurnar had been monitoring the situation from his post, watching as the humans, once considered an afterthought in the galactic order, now demonstrated their true potential. It was clear that the Zorath were not the only ones paying attention to what was happening in this remote sector of space. "Humanity's potential is beyond anything we ever imagined," Zurnar said to the Galactic Council, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "They've not only survived, they've thrived. The time for our interference is over." In a carefully calculated diplomatic message, Zurnar addressed the galactic powers, speaking not just as a representative of humanity, but as an advocate for their right to exist without interference. "The humans have demonstrated that they can survive and thrive independently," Zurnar's voice echoed through the vast communication networks. "They have developed a society that stands on its own, without the need for the help or control of the galactic empires. It is time for us to recognize their sovereignty. They are not a threat. They are a part of the galaxy now. And if we wish to continue our existence as a unified galactic community, we must respect that." His message was broadcast to every major power in the galaxy, an announcement to all that humanity, once cast aside as a weak and insignificant species, had now established its place in the universe. Zurnar's words were not just diplomatic, they were a declaration of independence for humanity. He had made it clear humanity could no longer be ignored or treated as an afterthought. As the transmission reached its conclusion, Zurnar's face remained calm, but his words held weight. "We, the humans, have proven that we are no longer dependent on the old ways. We are a new force in this galaxy, and we stand ready to contribute on our own terms." Back on the front lines, the Zorath had realized the full extent of their mistake. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. The battle was all but over, and the remaining Zorath vessels retreated, their pride shattered by the unexpected strength of the human fleet. Quinn, standing in the command center, watched the final retreat of the Zorath ships with a sense of quiet satisfaction. They had won not just the battle, but the right to exist on their own terms. "We've done it," Quinn said, his voice heavy with the weight of their victory. "We've shown the galaxy who we are." And with that, humanity had not only survived, they had taken their first steps toward a new future. One where they were no longer outsiders or victims, but players in their own right, standing tall among the stars. Quinn Rain had always been a visionary. He saw potential where others saw obstacles, and he had always believed that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their brute force, but in their creativity and determination. But even Quinn, with all his ingenuity and experience, had no idea just how deep humanity's technological potential ran, until one fateful discovery revealed an entirely new dimension of their capabilities. The breakthrough happened when Quinn was alone in his lab one late evening, his mind still swirling with thoughts of the Zorath conflict and the rapidly evolving needs of the colony. He had spent hours poring over the data from the chronolock system, refining the gravitational manipulations, trying to improve the system's energy efficiency. It was then that he noticed something in the data, something subtle but undeniably powerful. The chronolock wasn't just manipulating time. It was creating a distortion in the fabric of reality itself. The data patterns suggested that by fine-tuning the system, humanity could not only control the flow of time, but also manipulate the very structure of space. It was like opening a door to a realm of possibilities control over not just time and space, but the fundamental forces that govern the universe. Quinn stared at the data, his heart racing. This wasn't just another weapon or tool. This was a revolution. If they could control the way space itself behaved, they could change everything. With the realization dawning on him, Quinn rushed to find Isolde. She had been his closest ally throughout their journey, and he knew she would understand the gravity of this discovery. Isolde, you need to see this, Quinn said breathless as he burst into the command room where she was reviewing colony logistics. Isolde, always calm and composed, looked up from her data console. What's got you so worked up? Quinn's eyes shone with excitement as he laid out the data before her. This isn't just about time manipulation anymore. This is something bigger. Something I never even considered. We've been using the chronolock to manipulate gravitational and temporal fields, but I think we can go further. I think we can alter the very structure of space itself. Isolde's brow furrowed as she studied the data. You mean like bending the fabric of reality? Quinn nodded, a grin creeping across his face. Exactly. What if we could create entire pockets of space where the laws of physics as we know them don't apply? What if we could expand or contract space, or even create instantaneous travel between vast distances? This could change everything. Isolde's eyes narrowed as she processed the implications. If we can do that, it would be like opening a door to the universe itself. Imagine how we could change the way we interact with the galaxy: instant travel, unlimited energy, new forms of construction. The possibilities are endless. Quinn paced clearly, caught up in the excitement. We wouldn't just be hiding in the shadows anymore, Isolde. We could change the fabric of the galaxy itself. We could be free of all the constraints that have held us back. No more borders, no more limitations. But as Quinn and Isolde dove deeper into their research, they realized just how difficult the task ahead would be. Manipulating the fabric of space and time wasn't just a matter of refining their existing technology. It required a deep understanding of quantum mechanics, energy flows, and an entirely new form of material science. The breakthrough was profound, but it also came with risks. The fabric of space was delicate, and even small changes could have catastrophic consequences. Despite the challenges, Quinn and Isolde worked together tirelessly, often spending late nights in the lab perfecting the technology. Their partnership, once purely professional, began to grow stronger. They shared ideas, frustrations, and triumphs, slowly realizing how much they had come to depend on one another. While Quinn was the brilliant inventor, Isolde had an uncanny ability to see the bigger picture. She could envision how their discoveries could impact the galaxy on a cosmic scale, while Quinn focused on the details, pushing the boundaries of technology further than anyone had ever thought possible. You know, Quinn said one night, his voice slightly teasing, I didn't think you had it in you to stay up past midnight. Isolde raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a sly smile. I'm not the one who gets lost in quantum field data for hours at a time, am I? Besides, it's kind of fun watching you scramble to make sense of it all. Quinn chuckled, shaking his head. Hey, somebody has to make sense of it. I can't do all the work around here. Isolde rolled her eyes. I'm pretty sure you've done more than enough of that already, Quinn. Their playful banter was a small relief from the intensity of their work. It was moments like these when they could laugh together and share a lighter moment that reminded them both of why they were doing this in the first place, not just for survival, but for the future they were building. It was also in these quiet moments that they recognized a growing connection between them, something beyond friendship or professional respect. But neither of them acknowledged it out loud, at least not yet. For now, their focus was on the task at hand. The technology they developed from their work was aptly named the quantum weave. It wasn't just about bending space-time, it was about reconfiguring the very structure of reality. By creating localized pockets of altered space, humanity could effectively warp their environment, creating instant travel, unlimited energy sources, and even new forms of communication. It was a breakthrough that made the chronolock look like a primitive tool in comparison. The first successful application of the quantum weave was a test involving the construction of a large structure within the colony. Instead of having to manually transport materials across vast distances or wait for deliveries from distant colonies, they created a pocket of space where the laws of physics allowed for instantaneous material assembly. With the press of a button, entire buildings began to materialize out of thin air, as if the very fabric of the universe were bending to their will. It was a moment of awe, of wonder, and of immense pride. Humanity has unlocked the secret to creating reality itself. "We did it," Isel whispered, her voice filled with awe. "We've just changed everything." Quinn stood beside her, watching the first completed structure appear, his face lighting up with the thrill of discovery. "We've just created a future for humanity where nothing is impossible." But despite the success, they both knew the implications of this technology were far-reaching, and not everyone in the galaxy would be pleased by this discovery. The advanced civilizations of the galaxy had long established control over space travel and resources. Humanity's sudden leap forward had the potential to disrupt everything. At the same time, the bond between Quinn and Isel deepened. While their work brought them closer, it was the moments of humor and shared humanity that truly strengthened their relationship. As they continued to work side by side, the connection between them became undeniable, even if unspoken. They were a team in every sense of the word, balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses. One day, as they were working late into the night, Quinn looked at Isel with a tired but affectionate smile. "You know, if we make it through all of this, you'll owe me dinner." Isel gave him a dry look. "Dinner? You're already getting the greatest discovery in the history of humanity. Isn't that enough?" "Not quite," Quinn grinned. "I'm going to need a little more than that." Isel laughed softly, shaking her head. "You're impossible." And in that moment, they both realized that their partnership was about more than just technology or the fight for survival. It was about the human connections that made all of it worth fighting for. But the question remained, would the galaxy accept their newfound power, or would they see humanity's leap into the unknown as a threat? The answer would come in time. But for now, Quinn and Isel stood at the precipice of a future that no one had imagined, one where humanity's potential had no limits except for the ones they chose to impose on themselves. As humanity's colony in the unexplored region of space continued to grow, so did their influence. The self-sustaining world they had built from scratch began to attract more and more attention from the surrounding galactic empires. What had initially been perceived as a simple, isolated human outpost quickly became a thriving hub of innovation and technological advancement, one that had surpassed even the most optimistic projections of the human pioneers. The new discoveries, particularly the quantum weave and the chronolock technology, had proven that humanity was not the weak, backward species the other civilizations had once thought. And this, of course, did not go unnoticed. As the months passed, the other galactic powers began to reevaluate their perception of humanity. The Zorath, once the most powerful and ancient civilization in the galaxy, had been forced to reconsider their earlier dismissal of the human race. The Gorgath Empire, another of the galaxy's dominant forces, had begun to take a much more cautious approach toward humanity's expansion, no longer assuming that the humans were a passing curiosity. The Galadrian, alliance of highly advanced species that had ruled over vast sections of space for millennia, were now observing humanity's every move with growing interest. "They've done something that should have been impossible," said Varlock, a high-ranking member of the Gorgath Empire, as he stood before the Council of Species. "Humans are not only surviving in this remote part of the galaxy, they are thriving. How are they doing this? What technology have they discovered? We must investigate." A murmur of concern rippled through the council. It was clear that the discovery of humanity's capabilities had begun to shake the very foundation of the established order in the galaxy. For eons, the galactic empires had believed that they were the pinnacle of evolution, that no species could rise to challenge their dominance. But humanity's rapid development, especially with their newfound ability to manipulate time-space and the fundamental forces of the universe, was beginning to challenge that belief. "They are not as weak as we thought," said another council member, an elder from the Galadri. "But we cannot let this go unchallenged. We cannot allow them to grow unchecked, or they may one day surpass us all." The response from these powerful empires was swift and brutal. It was no longer enough to simply monitor humanity's progress. They needed to halt it. The Gorgath and the Zorath formed an uneasy alliance, quietly and covertly maneuvering against humanity's growing influence. They began to send covert reconnaissance missions, not just to observe, but to infiltrate. They wanted to know the full extent of humanity's technological advancements and, if necessary, to sabotage them. "We cannot allow them to become a threat." Varlock continued, his voice cold and filled with authority. "They are not just a curiosity anymore. They are a potential danger. Back in the human colony, Quinn Rain and his team were beginning to notice the strange activity on the periphery of their space. Unmarked ships were appearing at the edges of their territory, probing their defenses and monitoring their activities. At first, it seemed like a simple reconnaissance mission, a group of explorers curious about the humans' newfound power. But soon Quinn and Isol Corin began to suspect something far darker. The ships didn't simply observe, they were testing the boundaries of human space, poking at their defenses to see how much they could get away with. "Something's wrong," Isol said, her voice filled with unease as she studied the latest scans. "These ships aren't just curious. They're looking for weaknesses. They want to see how far they can push us before we react." Quinn clenched his jaw, his mind racing. "It's the Galactic Empire. They've been watching us for months, but now they're starting to get worried. They think we're a threat." The tension in the colony was palpable. The once confident pioneers were beginning to realize that the technology they had fought so hard to develop, the very technology that had made them so self-sufficient, was now drawing the ire of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. "We need to be ready," Quinn said to his leadership council. "We can't afford to wait for them to make the first move. They'll come for us, whether through diplomacy or force, and we have to be prepared to defend everything we've built." But even as Quinn and his team made preparations, the question remained, how far would they go to protect themselves? They had always believed that their technology was the key to their survival. But now they faced an even greater dilemma. Could they use their newfound power to defend themselves without risking an all-out war with the galactic empires? Would using their most powerful technologies create more enemies than they could handle? The decision was complicated. The chronolock and the quantum weave were powerful, yes, but they were also unpredictable. If they used these technologies against the galactic powers, it could provoke a conflict on a scale humanity wasn't ready for. Yet if they didn't act, they risked being crushed under the weight of the empires that had already underestimated them once before. As Quinn sat in his command room deep in thought, Isol joined him, her face serious. "You know this isn't going to end quietly," she said. "They won't simply leave us alone. Not now." Quinn nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I know, but what choice do we have? We've come too far to back down now." "We might not have to fight," Isol said, her voice thoughtful. "Maybe there's another way. We could appeal to them, show them that we don't want conflict. We could offer them a trade, or even an alliance. Perhaps they don't understand that we're not here to take their power. We're here to survive." Quinn looked at her, considering her words. "And if that doesn't work?" Isol's gaze hardened. "Then we fight, but not without exhausting every other option first." The next few weeks were spent preparing for every eventuality. Diplomacy, military tactics, and covert intelligence operations all became part of humanity's strategy. Quinn sent messages to the galactic empires explaining humanity's position and trying to offer peace. But deep down, he knew it wasn't just diplomacy that would win the day. It would be the strength of their resolve and the power of their technology. As tensions rose, Quinn and Isol continued to work together, building on their growing bond. They were not just allies in this fight, they had become something more, sharing the weight of their decisions and the burden of what was to come. But even as Quinn prepared for the worst, a part of him hoped for the impossible, that the galaxy could see humanity not as a threat, but as a new partner, a force that could add to the strength of the greater whole rather than disrupt it. In the end, the decision was clear. Humanity would fight, but they would do so on their terms, using their technology to defend their future, not to destroy others. They would reclaim their place in the galaxy not through brute force, but through their determination, ingenuity, and the strength of their will. As Quinn looked out over the growing city of the human colony, he knew one thing for sure: the future was theirs to shape, and they would not let anyone take that away from them. The galaxy, once a distant and mysterious expanse, was now a battleground for humanity's survival. After years of peace and steady growth, the time had come for humanity to face their ultimate test. A large-scale invasion from a coalition of galactic powers, led by the Zorath and the Gorgoth Empire, threatened to undo everything humanity had built. This wasn't just a skirmish or an isolated attack. It was a full-scale invasion, an attempt to crush humanity's burgeoning independence and reclaim what they had once believed was their domain. The invasion fleet, a vast armada of over 200 ships, stormed into human space with one clear objective: to subdue and annex humanity's newly established territory. The coalition of alien civilizations feared the technological advancements humans had achieved, particularly the manipulation of time and space. They saw the power of humanity's weapons like the chronolock as an existential threat, and they believed that to maintain control over the galaxy, humanity had to be stopped at all costs. Quinn Rain, standing on the bridge of his flagship, could see the invasion fleet on the horizon. The coalition's ships were enormous warships and dreadnoughts from multiple species, each bristling with weapons capable of destroying entire fleets. Their armada formed an imposing force, yet Quinn was unshaken. The human fleet, though smaller, had the advantage of technology that their enemies could not anticipate. "Quinn, the Zorath flagship is moving into position," Terran Mace said from his tactical station, his eyes scanning the data feeds. "They're going to make a direct assault on the main colony. They're coming in fast." Quinn's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "We'll give them something they're not expecting. Prepare the fleet for deployment. We fight smart, not hard. We use what we've learned." The human fleet, numbering just under 30 ships, had been honed into a swift, agile force, using their stealth technology and chronolock weapons to their advantage. Quinn knew they couldn't match the firepower of the invaders head-on, but humanity's real strength lay in their intelligence and their ability to manipulate time itself. As the first wave of enemy ships approached, Quinn activated the chronolock system. The familiar hum of the device filled the ship's command center as the fabric of space-time was manipulated around the human fleet. Ships that had once seemed slow and vulnerable now moved with unimaginable speed, darting in and out of enemy fire like phantoms. Meanwhile, the Zorath and Gorgath ships appeared frozen in time, their weapons discharging at a snail's pace. Their once deadly bombardments were rendered ineffective as the human ships danced through the chaos with ease. "This is it," Quinn muttered under his breath. "Now we strike." Humanity's counterattack was swift and brutal. Using the chronolock's ability to alter the flow of time, the human fleet launched an onslaught of precision strikes. Missiles streaked through the skies, guided by hyper-accelerated targeting systems, piercing through the weakened Zorath shields and disabling their weapon systems. The alien fleets, unable to react fast enough, fell victim to humanity's tactics. But even with the advantage of time manipulation, the war was far from over. The invaders were formidable, and the battle quickly escalated into a brutal all-out war. The Zorath flagship retaliated with devastating force, launching plasma beams and missiles at the human fleet. Meanwhile, the Gorgath Empire deployed their own weaponry, large ships with powerful energy cannons that could obliterate entire fleets in a single strike. Though the chronolock helped, it couldn't protect the human fleet from everything. "Shields are failing," Terran shouted. "We can't keep this up much longer." "They're adapting." Quinn's heart raced as he watched his fleet suffer losses. The chronolock, though effective, was not an invincible shield. The human fleet could dodge and disrupt enemy weapons, but it could only do so much against the overwhelming numbers and power of the invaders. "We fight until we can't," Quinn said, his voice steady. "This is our home, and we will not let them take it." The human fleet fought fiercely, using their advanced technology and tactics to press the advantage. The chronolock continued to give them a fleeting edge, but the battle was grueling. Ships exploded in the distance as the human fleet engaged in the most vicious dogfights of their lives. Enemy ships were torn apart, and human vessels suffered heavy damage as well. On the ground, the humans in the colony were also facing the consequences of the invasion. The enemy fleet had launched a wave of planetary bombardments targeting the human settlements on the surface. Civilians and military personnel scrambled to evacuate, but the sheer size of the enemy forces made it impossible to avoid some losses. "Esel, we've got incoming," Quinn shouted through the comms. "Get the civilians to shelter. We need to hold them off here." Esel's voice crackled in response, tense with urgency. "We're doing everything we can, Quinn. The outer defenses are failing. We're moving the last of the civilians underground. You need to hold them off up there." The battle was not just fought in space, it was fought on the ground as well. The humans were doing everything they could to protect their world, but it came at a heavy cost. The colony's defenses were being overwhelmed, and their ground forces, though brave, were outmatched by the superior firepower of the enemy. The human casualties began to mount as both sides fought tooth and nail for control of the planet. Despite the overwhelming odds, the human resolve never faltered. Each loss fueled their determination, and each victory, however small, gave them hope. Quinn knew that they couldn't win through sheer force alone. They had to outsmart the enemy, find a way to turn the tide without sacrificing everything they had worked so hard to build. In the middle of the battle, Quinn and Isol, along with Ambassador Zernar, realized that they needed to change their approach. The Zorath and Gorgath Empire had underestimated humanity's potential, but now it was clear they had to be taught a lesson they wouldn't forget. But it wasn't just about victory, it was about preserving humanity's future. "We can't fight forever," Zernar said, his voice calm, but filled with a sense of urgency. "We fought with everything we've got, but we need to secure our future, without losing everything." Quinn nodded, his mind working furiously. "We need to end this now." "But how we use their own arrogance against them," Isol said, her voice full of conviction. "We've already proven that we can manipulate time. We don't need to just win the battle. We need to make them believe we can win indefinitely. We'll make them think this is only the beginning of an endless war." Quinn's eyes widened as he grasped her meaning. "If we show them that we have the power to keep this up, to keep fighting forever, they'll break. They'll retreat." Zernar agreed. "It's risky, but it's the only way to guarantee we survive this. We show them that they cannot break us no matter how hard they try." In a final, desperate move, Quinn ordered the deployment of a massive chronolock field, one so large it enveloped not just their fleet but the entire sector. The human fleet accelerated to unimaginable speeds, and the enemy was once again rendered powerless, unable to react to the human ship's swift strikes. The psychological effect on the invaders was immediate. Seeing their own technology rendered useless and their weapons impotent began to wear down their resolve. The Zorath and the Gorgath forces hesitated, unsure how to respond to an enemy that seemed invincible, whose power to manipulate time and space was beyond their comprehension. One by one, the invading ships began to retreat, their fleets scattering, as they realized they could not win. Humanity had not only fought for their survival, they had shown the galaxy that they were no longer weak. They were strong not because of their firepower, but because of their ability to adapt to survive and to overcome impossible odds. As the enemy retreated, Quinn stood in the command center, breathless and exhausted. He had won, but the cost had been immense. The human fleet had been battered, the colony damaged, and many had fallen. But they had held their ground, and they had proven to the galaxy that humanity could not and would not be crushed. "We did it," Quinn whispered, though the weight of the victory felt hollow in the face of the sacrifices. Isol stood beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "We've just made our future possible." As the final remnants of the invaders' fleet vanished into the distance, Quinn, Isol, and Zernar knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy had just witnessed the rise of a new power, and with it the fate of the universe had been irrevocably changed. Just when humanity thought they had weathered the storm and their place in the galaxy had been firmly established, an even greater challenge emerged, one that threatened not just their survival, but the very fabric of the universe itself. It wasn't an invading fleet, nor an alliance of galactic powers bent on domination. It was something far older, far more insidious, and infinitely more dangerous. The mysterious alien race that emerged from the shadows was known as the Ikar, an ancient and powerful species with a dark agenda. Unlike any other civilization humanity had encountered, the Ikar were not driven by territorial conquest or resource acquisition. They had a much grander plan to reshape the very structure of the universe itself. The Ikar were a species of enormous towering beings, their bodies covered in dark, sleek exoskeletons that shimmered with iridescent energy pulses. They had a humanoid shape, but their physical features were not entirely human. Their heads were elongated and featureless, with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through the very fabric of space. Their limbs were long and multi-jointed, capable of extraordinary strength, and their technology was so advanced that it defied all conventional understanding. What made the Ikar terrifying, however, wasn't just their immense size or power, it was their ability to manipulate the very fabric of space-time. Unlike the chronolock, which merely bent time and space in localized areas, the Ikar could alter the underlying laws of reality itself, creating new realities and even collapsing others. This gave them the ability to reshape entire star systems, cause supernovas, and rewrite the fundamental constants of the universe. It was a power that humanity could neither comprehend nor defend against. Humanity first became aware of the Ikar when their fleet appeared at the edge of the human-controlled sector. Their ships were like nothing anyone had ever seen, massive twisting vessels that seemed to shimmer in and out of existence, their surfaces constantly shifting in waves of dimensional energy. The Ikar had begun to infiltrate the galaxy under the guise of neutrality, silently manipulating events behind the scenes, inciting conflicts between various civilizations, and destabilizing regions of space. They were the puppet masters, pulling strings from the shadows. It wasn't until the human colony detected strange disturbances in the fabric of space that Quinn Rain and his team realized something was wrong. They had been monitoring the temporal and gravitational anomalies in the region, and suddenly the patterns had changed. The disturbances were not natural, they were deliberate. Quinn looked at this isocorin, said, her voice trembling as she analyzed the data. These anomalies, they're not just random. Someone is using them to manipulate space itself. We're being watched. Quinn stared at the data, his mind racing. This isn't just a glitch. Someone's creating these distortions. The team quickly realized that the Ikar had been behind the disturbances, and they were actively working to destabilize human-controlled space. The Ikar were attempting to collapse the region into a singularity which would effectively erase everything humanity had worked for, creating a black hole where their colonies and their entire existence would be swallowed up. "We need to stop this," Quinn said, a new sense of urgency in his voice. "The Ikar aren't just a threat to us, they're trying to rewrite the very laws of the universe. If we don't act now, it will be too late." The question was, how could humanity fight a species with the ability to rewrite the very structure of reality? The chronolock was powerful, but it was nothing compared to what the Ikar could do. The Ikar's manipulation of space-time was so advanced that humanity's best technology seemed primitive in comparison. Quinn and Isol knew they had to think beyond conventional weapons. They couldn't simply fight the Ikar with force, they had to find a way to counteract their ability to manipulate reality itself. As the Ikar continued their work, humanity made a bold decision. Instead of confronting them head-on with brute force, they would attempt to disrupt the Ikar's control over space-time using their own technology. The plan was risky. If it failed, the consequences could be disastrous, but they had no other choice. The first step was to create a counterfield, a quantum-based distortion field capable of neutralizing the Ikar's reality warping effects. Using the technology that had powered the chronolock, Quinn and Isol worked tirelessly to build a device capable of counteracting the Ikar's manipulation of the fabric of space. They called it the reality anchor. It was a powerful device capable of stabilizing space-time within a localized area, preventing the Ikar from altering the very laws of physics. "We can't just defend ourselves, we have to disrupt their hold on space itself," Quinn said as he supervised the final preparations for the reality anchor. "If we succeed, we'll strip them of their power. But it's a long shot." The reality anchor was deployed in a daring mission to the heart of the Ikar's fleet, where they had been manipulating the region's gravitational fields. The device was designed to create an artificial bubble of stable spacetime around the fleet, neutralizing the Ikar's reality warping abilities within that field. If it worked, the Ikar's fleet would be trapped in normal space, unable to continue their assault. As the device activated, the human fleet engaged the Ikar in a desperate battle. The Ikar retaliated with devastating force, attempting to warp the very fabric of reality around them to crush the human fleet. But the reality anchor worked. The distortions began to fade, and the human ships, once vulnerable to the Ikar's manipulation of space-time, found themselves in an even playing field. The Ikar's powerful ships were no longer able to twist reality to their will. The battle was fierce and brutal. The human fleet, now able to engage the Ikar on equal terms, fought with everything they had. Missiles and energy weapons struck the Ikar fleet, damaging their ships and forcing them to retreat. The tide of the battle turned, and humanity for the first time had the upper hand. But even as the Ikar retreated, Quinn knew that the galaxy had irrevocably changed. The Ikar were not the only force capable of altering space-time. Humanity had now uncovered a power that could reshape the very rules of existence, and with that power came responsibility. In the aftermath of the battle, Quinn Isol and Ambassador Zerner stood in the command center looking at the damage the Ichor had wrought. Humanity had won the battle, but they knew the war was far from over. What happens now? Zernar asked, his voice somber. The Ichor will regroup. This isn't the end. No, Quinn said, his voice quiet but resolute. It's the beginning. We've proven that we can change the rules of the universe, and we'll do whatever it takes to protect our future. But as Quinn stared out into the vast expanse of space, he knew that humanity had crossed a line. They had unlocked the ability to manipulate the very laws of physics, and with that power came the potential to either save or destroy everything they had worked for. We need to be careful, Isel said softly, standing beside him. We've just changed everything, but the universe isn't going to wait for us to catch our breath. Quinn nodded, his mind already racing with the implications of their victory. We've rewritten the rules, Isel. Now we need to make sure we use this power wisely. The battle with the Ichor had proven one thing: humanity was no longer just a fledgling species struggling to survive. They had become something more, a force capable of shaping the universe itself. The question was, how would they wield that power in the future? The decision was clear: humanity would stand at the crossroads of the universe, determining not just their fate, but the fate of every civilization that dared to challenge the status quo. And the future, for the first time, was theirs to define. Humanity had risen from the ashes of oppression, had fought against overwhelming odds, and had forged an independence in the heart of the galaxy that no one had expected. The victory over the Ichor, a species capable of manipulating the very fabric of space-time, had shifted the balance of power in the universe. It was not just a military victory, it was a triumph of intellect, resilience, and an unwavering will to survive. Humanity had proven that they were not the weak species they had once been seen as, but a force to be reckoned with, capable of changing the very rules of existence. The foundation of humanity's self-sustaining system was established during their battle for survival. The quantum weave and chronolock technologies had not only given them an edge in combat, but they had reshaped every aspect of human life. The system Quinn and Isel had developed was a true marvel of self-sufficiency, a tightly controlled society where everything from energy production to resource allocation was governed by artificial intelligence. It was a world where every citizen had their role, where technology worked in harmony with human ingenuity to provide a sustainable, thriving existence. The reality anchor deployed during the battle against the Ichor had not only neutralized the alien threat, but had also become a symbol of humanity's power. The ability to manipulate space-time had proven to be humanity's greatest asset, one that no galactic empire could ignore. The Ichor, though powerful, had been forced to retreat, their plan to rewrite the laws of the universe thwarted. Humanity had not just defended their home, they had changed the course of the future. The influence of humanity's self-governed system spread rapidly. As they expanded their reach across the galaxy, they used their technology to establish colonies, peaceful trade routes, and cooperative relationships with other civilizations. While the older galactic powers had once looked down on humanity, seeing them as primitive and weak, they were now forced to acknowledge the unprecedented strides humanity had made. But the acceptance was not immediate. The galactic empires, though recognizing humanity's power, were reluctant to embrace them fully. The Zorath, once the most dominant force in the galaxy, sent envoys to humanity's new system with a mixture of caution and respect. The Gorgath Empire, though slow to react, began to send ambassadors to open trade talks, though their diplomats were wary. The once dismissive Galadri, a race of beings known for their diplomatic and intellectual prowess, now watched humanity with a blend of awe and unease. They no longer saw humans as a threat to their power. They saw them as an unpredictable new force capable of reshaping the future of the galaxy. The respect that humanity had earned came not just from their technology, but from their resolve. The older civilizations, once convinced that humanity was a flash in the pan, now understood that humans were a species with the potential to break the old galactic order. Their resourcefulness, their ability to adapt, and their newfound strength had earned them a place in the galaxy that could not be ignored. The Zorath, for all their power, had been humiliated by humanity's swift and effective use of the chronolock and reality anchor. They had underestimated humans once, and they would never make that mistake again. It was during these discussions, after the initial shock of humanity's rise had subsided, that Quinn and Isol began to realize the true extent of what they had accomplished, not just as leaders, but as symbols of humanity's potential. They were more than pioneers now, they were icons representing the very essence of human resilience and ingenuity. Their bond, once rooted in shared mission and intellectual partnership, had begun to evolve into something deeper, something undeniable. One night as they stood together in the command center, watching the holographic display of the new intergalactic map, a map that now included human-controlled space as a major player in the galaxy, Isol spoke softly. "Quinn, do you realize what we've done?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Quinn turned to her, his eyes filled with the weight of the past few years, the battles, the victories, and the long hours they had spent together, working side by side. "We've done the impossible," he said, his voice steady. "But it's not just about survival anymore, Isol. It's about shaping the future." Isol smiled, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "You've always been about the future, but sometimes I wonder if we've truly realized the enormity of what we've achieved. We've not only defeated the Akar, we've created something no one thought was possible, something that could change everything." Quinn looked at her, then really looked at her, and for the first time he saw more than just the brilliant scientist and diplomat he had worked alongside for so long. He saw a partner, someone who had shared every step of this journey with him, someone who had made all of this possible. There was something between them now, something unspoken but undeniable. "I don't think we've realized it fully," Quinn said, his voice quiet, "but I think we're starting to." The realization hung in the air between them, a feeling neither had fully acknowledged until now. They had been through so much together, their relationship forged in the heat of battle and the pressure of the unknown. The foundation of their bond had always been their shared commitment to humanity's future. But now, standing together in the quiet aftermath of their victory, they could no longer deny the deeper connection between them. As if on cue, Zernar entered the room, his usual calm demeanor unchanged. "I see the two of you are finally coming to terms with what you've accomplished. I must say, humanity's future has never looked brighter." Quinn and Isol exchanged a quick glance, both understanding the implication of Zernar's words. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were shaping the future of the galaxy, and their place in that future was becoming more and more certain. "We still have work to do," Quinn replied, his voice filled with determination. "This is just the beginning." Zernar nodded in agreement. "Indeed, but even the greatest journeys start with a single step, and you two," he looked at them both with a knowing smile, "have already taken humanity farther than anyone ever thought possible." The message was clear. Humanity was no longer just a species trying to find its place in the universe. They had carved out a space for themselves and were now a force that could not be ignored. With their technological advancements, their newfound strength, and their resolve, humanity had become a central player in the galactic stage. As Quinn and Isol continued to work together, their bond grew stronger, and their shared vision for humanity's future became a guiding light for all. The once weak species that had been cast aside now stood tall, not just in the eyes of their fellow humans, but in the eyes of the galaxy. The future was wide open for humanity, and though many challenges remained, they now knew one thing for certain: they had the power to shape that future. They had not only reclaimed their place in the galaxy, they had changed the rules. The universe had just entered a new era, and humanity was leading the way. The universe, vast and unknowable, had once been a place of infinite possibilities. For centuries, humanity had been a tiny overlooked speck within this boundless expanse, lost among countless stars and galaxies. Yet against all odds, the species that had once been cast out of the galactic fold now stood as a beacon of strength, resilience, and untapped potential. What had begun as a fight for survival had become a revolution, a bold declaration that humanity was not just a part of the universe, but a force capable of shaping its future. Years had passed since humanity's victory over the Icar, and in that time the human-controlled sector of space had flourished. The self-sustaining society that Quinn Rain and Isol Karen had worked tirelessly to build had grown into a powerful empire in its own right. With thriving colonies, a robust economy, and technological advancements that continued to surpass even the expectations of the galaxy's ancient civilizations. Humanity had not just survived, they had thrived. The quantum weave and chronolock technologies, once considered their greatest weapons, were now cornerstones of everyday life. From transportation to communication, energy production, to scientific exploration, humanity's mastery over the fundamental laws of space-time had opened doors to new worlds and possibilities that no one had previously imagined. The age-old limitations of distance, time, and energy had been obliterated, giving rise to a society where the only limits were the imagination and ambition of its people. The influence of humanity had spread across the galaxy. Alien civilizations that had once scoffed at their feeble attempts to belong in the galactic order now sought partnerships and alliances with humanity. The Zorath Gorgath and even the enigmatic Galadri were no longer adversaries but allies drawn to humanity's ingenuity and resilience. The human message was clear: they did not seek dominance, but collaboration and mutual growth. Through their technological advancements, they offered a vision of the future, one where no species was bound by the limits of their origins, where every civilization could rise to its fullest potential. The legacy of humanity was not defined by their ability to conquer, but by their willingness to adapt, learn, and evolve. They had faced existential threats, overcome impossible odds, and emerged from the darkness of their exile stronger and more unified than ever before. In the process, they had forged a future where the impossible was within reach. For Quinn and Isol, the journey had not been just about the technology, the battles, or the political shifts. It had been about understanding their own hearts. Over the years, as they had fought side by side, worked tirelessly to build a future for their people, and navigated the complexities of leadership, their bond had deepened. What had started as a professional relationship had gradually blossomed into something far more profound. It wasn't until one quiet evening, after another long day of strategizing and reviewing the progress of the human colonies, that the truth became undeniable. Quinn and Isol found themselves standing on the observation deck of their flagship, watching as the stars drifted slowly by. The galaxy stretched out before them, vast, beautiful, and filled with infinite possibilities. But at that moment, neither of them saw the universe. They only saw each other. Quinn Isol began, her voice softer than usual. Do you ever wonder how it all happened? How did we get here? It feels like a lifetime ago that we were fighting just to survive. Quinn turned to her, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of everything they had accomplished, all the sacrifices and the victories that had brought them to this point, settled between them. Then Quinn finally spoke, his voice steady, yet filled with the emotion he had kept inside for so long. We didn't just survive, Isol, he said, taking a step closer to her. We made this happen. We built it together. But I don't think I ever realized how much I needed you in this journey, not just for the mission, but for everything. Isol's heart skipped a beat. She had always respected Quinn, admired his brilliance, and shared his vision for humanity's future. But over the years, that admiration had turned into something more, something deeper, something undeniable. She stepped forward, closing the gap between them. I've never wanted anything more than to see humanity rise, to see our future unfold, she said quietly, her voice full of sincerity. But you're right. We didn't do it alone. I needed you too. We've both sacrificed so much. And through it all, I've realized something. She paused, searching his eyes. I've realized I don't want to face the future without you by my side. Quinn's heart swelled as he looked into Isol's eyes, the connection between them clearer than ever. All the trials, all the battles they had fought, not just for the survival of humanity, but for a future where they could be together. Quinn had never spoken of his feelings for Isol, never let the depth of his attachment show. But now, standing there amidst the stars they had fought so hard to protect, he couldn't deny it any longer. I don't think I've ever said this, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I can't imagine a future without you. You've been my partner in every way that matters, in the fight, in our victories, and in my life. Isol smiled, the weight of his words settling into her heart like a comforting truth. Then we'll face this future together. No more fighting alone, Quinn. We've already built something incredible, and we're just getting started. As they stood together, the stars of the galaxy reflecting in their eyes, Quinn and Isol knew that this was more than just a partnership. It was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for humanity, but for themselves. They had both sacrificed so much, but now, in the quiet aftermath of their struggles, they had found something that transcended even their lofty ambitions: each other. Their love, forged in the fires of conflict and nurtured in the hope of a better future, became the foundation upon which the next era of humanity would be built. Together, they would lead their people into the unknown hand in hand, knowing that no matter what challenges awaited them, they would face them together. The future, once uncertain, now seemed limitless. With their technology, their unity, and their unwavering spirit, humanity had proven that no force, whether from within or beyond the stars, could ever truly stand in their way. And as Quinn and Isol looked out at the stars, they knew one thing for sure: the legacy of humanity was just beginning. Humanity has come a long way from the brink of extinction to becoming a dominant force in the galaxy. From the ashes of oppression and isolation, they had risen not just to survive, but to thrive, breaking barriers, defying expectations, and reshaping the universe in their image. With their mastery over time and space, humanity was no longer a weak and insignificant species, but a symbol of resilience, adaptability, and potential. The victory over the Akar and the establishment of a self-sustaining society paved the way for an era where humanity's influence stretched across the stars. What had once been a desperate struggle for survival had become a journey toward unity, peace, and limitless possibilities. Through the hardships they faced, humanity had learned the true meaning of strength, not in power alone, but in their ability to rise above adversity and build a future where no boundaries existed. Quinn and Isol, though once driven solely by the need to protect their people, had discovered something greater in their journey, a love and partnership that transcended the battles and struggles. Their shared vision for humanity's future was no longer a mission. It was a personal commitment, a promise to face whatever came next, side by side. The galaxy, once filled with uncertainty, now held a new hope, one forged by humanity's ability to shape the future, to change the very fabric of the universe. And as Quinn and Isol stood together, looking toward the stars, they knew that this was only the beginning of a legacy that would endure for generations to come. Humanity had not just found a place in the universe, they had claimed their future, and no one could ever take that from them. The universe would never be the same again.